Now I'm going to talk about ICOs. I don't know how many people have heard of them yet, but the focus of this was to be crowdfunding. And cryptocurrency has been presenting some really unique new opportunities for that, some of which you've already heard a bit about, like with the DDP. As a way of, there's a lot of ways you can go about fundraising through cryptocurrency, and some are simpler than others. You've heard what the DDP did. You saw the QR codes in their video. One of the interesting ways that people raise money through Bitcoin is like that. Very simple. The QR code Gary was putting up for donating to the DDP can be seen directly. You can scan it in person, or if he's on TV, you can scan it through the TV. And what's interesting about this also is actually right now we're having a problem with what we call scalability, where Bitcoin transaction fees are a lot higher than they should be, but that's not a permanent problem. Normally, cryptocurrency is great for what we call microtransactions. If you want to send someone a small amount of money, which can be common in a non-profit scenario. You know, if sometimes everyone might want to send $1 to a cause they all support, but you can't easily PayPal someone $1. The fee is greater than that, depending on where you live. So this presents some interesting ways of doing that. Everyone could band together, you could get 50 cents from 1 million people, and you could effectively raise a lot of money this way without taxing any individual donor very heavily. So a lot of charities have been doing that. They started a few years ago when Bitcoin, as being accepted for money, really started to take off. But there's a lot more interesting things you can do with it as well. Like Gary also mentioned peace bonds. This is going to get, we have a thing, we used to call it Bitcoin 2.0, but with Bitcoin and blockchain technology, you can actually do a lot more than just send and receive money. The blockchain basically is a ledger. The blockchain that all participants in the Bitcoin network possess, if they're a full participant, simply says how many coins everyone has. It's a list of balances. When you send money to someone, you do not actually send a little coin from your phone to his phone through the wires. What you send is a message, a command, to everyone with the blockchain to subtract some money from their listed balance and add to someone else's. But there's no reason to restrict this to money. We could actually list whatever we wanted on a blockchain because it's just information. Right now, we're listing 1 Bitcoin, he has 3 Bitcoins, but you could also list things like your house, your car, how much gold or oil you possess in an account somewhere. And that's where it gets really interesting, a lot of the fundraising potential for cryptocurrency. Like he mentioned, peace bonds. A peace bond, or anything like it, could be put on the blockchain just like Bitcoins are. And this starts to be murky because no one's really seen this style of fundraising before. It's kind of like equity and kind of not. Basically, I think what Gary explained he was doing, he created peace bonds and he could sell them to people and repay them later. And other people have done this. For example, there was a Bitcoin exchange, which was the exchange that went down and they had to make their own coin, Bitfinex?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
They did a similar thing where someone hacked the Bitfinex exchange, and this is why you should listen to him and not keep your money on an exchange, because what happens is everyone lost. They couldn't pay everyone back, so if you had money at the time, 30% of it was gone. But the rest, they created their own token, I forget what it was called, Bitfinex coins or something like that. And they paid people back in those, just like Gary could pay people in peace bonds, with the intent that they're worth that much and could be repaid later.
They actually just repaid them all a few days ago.
They did, yes.
Yeah, a few days ago.
And I wasn't sure if they
It's
would,
amazing.
and it is amazing, because that has never happened before.
They paid
Anything
everyone
like
back,
that.
you said. Yeah.
Yep.
They paid everyone back.
Well, except for the 30% shave
Wow.
off their exchanges. But
Cool.
yeah, they paid everyone back.
Whoever held the tokens.
Whoever had the
got paid
tokens
back
got paid back.
in
Correct.
value.
Huh.
And
They didn't have to do that though,
Didn't have to know.
but they chose to do that. That's
no
pretty
one would
cool.
use their exchange again if they didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so as a business, it kind of had to.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Light goes on. Yes.
So now you're starting to see some of the more advanced ways you can raise money with cryptocurrency. It's not just a means of sending bitcoins to one another, but there are way more advanced things you could do. And here's another example. You could, theoretically, people already do this. They list a token, name it whatever, a gold coin. I've seen someone do pink coin where it's backed with diamonds, and their token is worth the underlying asset. And you can do that yourself, but the asset you back it with, instead of say gold, and you agree, if they give you the gold coin they had, you'll give them equivalent gold for it. But you can also do that with say equity in your company. And that's confusing legally. I have to warn you that do not do that in the United States. The Canadian government will tolerate it for now. I don't think that will last forever, right? Because once you back your coin with equity in a company, the SEC wants a cut. That's how they are. They want everything to be above board where equity is involved. Some people will set up a company in like Belize or some Caribbean island somewhere to get away with that. But yeah, most people are not using that method of fundraising in crypto due to those legal concerns. In fact, there was a crypto stock exchange years ago. I don't know, I can't remember what it was called. Do you know what I'm talking about? But they would list stocks on their exchange and you could buy them with Bitcoin, but then the SEC shut them down. So you can see it's complicated there.
Was it an exchange or just like, was it like UltraCoin? Do you hear what was it like UltraCoin? So they allowed that, right? I think you can buy shares of companies with UltraCoin.
Yeah, I can't remember, but there was an actual like, just like their online stock markets where you can trade, it was like that with Bitcoin, but they didn't get away with it for very long. But it's still an interesting idea, yes. If you did get the SEC, or I forget what the Canadian equivalent is called, but on your side, then that would be really useful. And there are lots of barriers you eliminate in doing that. To invest in most companies, there are a lot of requirements. Sometimes you need to be a licensed investor, actually, go out and get a certificate, because the government does not trust you to invest your own money, basically.
And you have to have a certain amount of money.
Yeah,
You
you
have to
do.
have like $1 million.
And there are
Some of them, okay,
there are
yeah.
some countries where there might be people living there who want to invest in you, but they cannot due to traditional financial barriers. In China, it's common. A lot of people in China love these ICOs, and they participate in them all the time. And the thing is, they can't really move money out of China very easily. There's a cap, because they fear the flight of money from their country as people leave and go abroad. So yeah, it's very interesting, but the primary way people are going about fundraising in cryptocurrency now is with what we call access tokens. And there are a lot of good examples of that, and I worked with a lot of them, like Factum, Decent. Scenario's not that great, but I helped them too. But the idea here is these applications, you need their token to use it. Kind of like you need a Chuck E. Cheese coin to play at the arcade at Chuck E. Cheese. And they sell those tokens to you when you enter. This is the same concept. Factum, for example, is a network that allows you to hash data into the Bitcoin blockchain. But to do it, you need a factoid. You send it to the network, and that is the cost. And that gives a factoid an intrinsic value. It's backed, and this is really interesting. I've been meaning to write about this as well. The idea that you can back a coin with a service. We've been backing things with goods for a long time. That's what money was traditionally. It was supposed to be worth gold or something you could redeem it for. But now we're reaching a point where they're backing coins with services they provide, which is really interesting. Like there's one called Chronobank, and a time token is literally worth an hour of labor. So if you were to believe that human labor in a region will go up or down in value, you could speculate upon that by buying, selling, or shorting time tokens. And it's never really before been possible to do that kind of thing, I think. But the trick here is they can sell those tokens before the network is available. And this is where the fundraising mechanism comes in. Long before Factom's network, for example, was available and hashing data for people, they were already selling the factoids. And analogously, it does not give you equity in their company or anything like that. It's a use token. So it's more like when you pre-order a video game or a movie before it comes out. You're buying good or service, but you're doing it before it's available. And legally speaking, people have been doing that a while. In the video game industry, it's hugely common. Like Grand Theft Auto does that every year. But they never really looked at it as a fundraising mechanism. They just saw it as another revenue tool. But now the idea is, we call this a pre-mine. Whenever a new cryptocurrency comes into being, it needs an initial supply. Well, not necessarily, but usually it has an initial supply as soon as the network kicks off. So that initial supply can belong to no one, or someone. That's what they're selling. So Factom, for example, was to start, I forget with how many coins exactly, but the network launched with X coins, and they sold them to people ahead of time. And then when the network came out, those coins were given to them. So this does bypass the SEC. It's not equity. They can't. Ontario, we're starting to get warnings about it. Like the Ontario Securities Commission recently put out a thing about ICOs and how, but it wasn't a it was more like a warning. You're still allowed to do that in every jurisdiction.
So they're fearing a threat to the traditional purchasing of shares and mutual funds and banks, and the banks basically said, hey, we want to issue a warning so that people can feel a little bit afraid about actually doing a little more information, because what I hear you saying is freedom for us. It's pretty darn cool.
Yeah, like he mentioned, a lot of banks in Canada are not cool with crypto, but the government is. The Canadian government is one of the most friendly in the world to this. The problem is that banks are private entities and they can not serve you, just like you don't have to give someone a haircut or any other service you provide. But it is definitely growing. Like so far, hundreds of millions of dollars have been raised this way. And in fact, the largest crowd sale in world history was raised this way. It was the DAO project. Although I didn't buy any because I thought it was glitchy. And I warned you all not to buy any, but a lot of you did. And but that's not the point. The point is the way they raised money in the first place was quite revolutionary and highly successful. No one with a traditional fundraising scheme has ever raised more than $100 million. They were the first. And question?
Yeah, I was just mentioning when you're talking about pre-mines, because the classic example is Ripple. There's no SEC issue in the United States, but are you aware of any issues with FinCEN? Because Ripple got hit with an $800,000 fine
Oh yeah, that's right.
over being a money services, being a what's called a money transmitter in the United States without a license because they did a pre-mine.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard vaguely of that, but Ripple is also in a somewhat different situation where Ripple works directly with banks as gateways at all times. And I think that necessarily puts Ripple under more scrutiny. The fact that they're always working with banks requires them to be more above board. I'm not sure, to be honest, because I don't like Ripple. It doesn't have a blockchain, but a lot of people do. But yeah, that's the way it works.
So you're saying a blockchain makes it safer?
Well, yeah. So the blockchain is the technology that makes Bitcoin work, right? We all have a shared ledger, and when we issue money, we issue an order to all update the ledger. Ripple does not have that. Ripple requires slightly more trust and centralization than blockchain-based cryptocurrencies. Money enters their network via gateways, which are all banks. So it's basically bank coin.
Do they not have any blockchains, or is it just private blockchain?
There's no blockchain.
There's no blockchain.
Well, it's so I never really
one
got a
person
handle
owns it.
on the Ripple consensus.
Ripple is an IOU system. So the way gateways work, it's a lot like Hawala, if you've ever heard of the ancient Hawala method of transmitting money, wherein still used in India, North Africa, the Middle East, wherein you give money to Huwaladar in one country, say in Canada, and the Huwaladar back in North Africa gives it to your family there, with the promise that at some point in the future, the two Huwaladars will meet up and settle, or send an assistant to do so. In reality, this network is often settled with violence, because there's no, if one Huwaladar doesn't feel like settling, that's what happens. And a lot of those networks are family-based, and so that's how they trust each other with that. But it doesn't always work out. Ripple is a digital form of that. In the Ripple system, the gateways or banks will give you dollars for dollars in the Ripple system. They're IOUs essentially. Any token floating around in Ripple's system has to have a person who issued it who will take the token back and give you its underlying asset. And that person doesn't have to do that, and that's why it requires more trust, right? What if that person just decided, nah, I'm done with this?
I like blockchains.
Yeah, don't we all? Blockchains are great. Question?
Yeah, just a quick question about Factum or the factoids. Did you say that gets injected on the Bitcoin blockchain?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah, it's a thing called proof of existence, and this is another thing that I think people hugely underestimate in Bitcoin, which is why I'm still a huge fan, even in the midst of the scaling crisis. Proof of existence is the concept that you can take any data and hash it and put that hash in the blockchain. You can put all kinds of information in the blockchain, basically. When you send money, when you send a Bitcoin, you issue a transaction that enters the blockchain that tells it to update. But you can put any other information in the transaction you want that you issue into the blockchain. Factum chooses to put the hash of your data in that transaction into the blockchain.
So, but doesn't that contribute to also increasing the size of the block then if they're doing
It
that?
does.
So-
But actually, Factum's method of doing so is very clever. And describing it would require talking about Merkle trees. I don't know if
Oh,
anyone
I
wants me
read
to
your
talk about
article on
Merkle
that.
trees.
It's confusing.
But, there may
There's a
find-
whiteboard over there.
Yeah, I don't want to draw a Merkle tree right now. But basically, you can take data of any size, a picture, a story, a movie, and put it through a hash function to turn it into a number. You cannot do it backwards unless you have a quantum computer or massive amounts of computational power at your disposal. So the number the data got turned into is unreadable. It looks like numbers to me. Put that in the blockchain, you don't know what it is. But if you take that data and hash it again, the number will always be the same. So say, for example, we had a contract that we signed for some business deal we were doing, and I hashed the contract into the Bitcoin blockchain. 1 year later, we disagree about the terms of the contract, and he says, no, it says here that you gave me twice that much money, you owe me money. And we can take the document and hash it the same way we did last time, and if the number is different, that means the document has changed. It has been doctored. You see, we call this proof of existence, that data existed in a certain form at a certain time. Factum is a decentralized means of doing that. Factum takes everyone's data who wants it hashed and combines it into one single hash value and inserts that into the blockchain every 10 minutes.
What is that, good or bad? I don't know.
Bad.
Okay.
Why is that bad?
How come?
Just joke.
Oh,
no.
well,
I was gonna get to that. So for example, like there's this huge debate with, Bitcoin Unlimited versus, SegWit, the core team and Bitcoin Unlimited. I mean, it's like if Factum, like
Core team loves Factum.
how are they allowed to inject data into the Bitcoin blockchain when they're increasing the size of the blocks? I mean, isn't that contributing to the problem that Bitcoin's having right now?
Well, I mean,
Or
what
is
do you
it
mean
just
allowed? You can't stop them. This is a
Oh.
permissionless network. If they want to put data into the blockchain, they're going to do it.
who puts this data?
Anyone can. Factum, no human does it. Factum
Just like a
is a
13
decentralized network, so someone's machine does so.
Can it be any file can be hashed? you
Yep,
know?
any file. I could
No
take,
matter how big
That's not
it is or
transact-
what.
I could hash you if I wanted to, and take your genetic code. Proof of Gary LaChance. He's changed.
A field so you can put a certain amount of data in a Bitcoin transaction.
There is a limit,
Yeah, what's
actually.
the,
And that limit is what you're using to
Remember.
put what Factum is using to put in the hash. So you're actually taking the hash and putting it in that block of data that you can put in a Bitcoin transaction.
Correct. No, I love this idea, actually, and personally, a lot of people are going to get mad at me for saying this. I think that's what Bitcoin is meant for. It is a proof of existence app. Some people still think it's meant solely for money, but look at the transaction fees right now. Are you going to go buy coffee at a $2 fee? No. But in terms of proof of existence, the best place to park a hash for preserving authenticity is the blockchain that is least likely to be forked, corrupted, or doctored in any way. Even though Bitcoin's fees keep rising, because of its massive mining network and huge market cap, the Bitcoin blockchain is still the most secure and least likely to be 51% attacked or maligned in any way. So pretty much everyone does it there. In fact, there's a lawyer who does this, an AI lawyer who keeps hashing all of the records of conversation into the blockchain. And that's probably the future of it, in my opinion.
So are you saying that if we're gonna create a cryptocurrency, we should take the hash and, using your language, store it in Bitcoin and then have a proof of existence and then kind of move up from there?
I guess so. I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, well, no, I'm trying to understand, as a beginner, how I can use this and understand it.
Well, you can just go on the Factum network and use it, but I mean, the scenarios in which you would want to use it would be business scenarios.
So I want to create a coin backed with real estate, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Would I use that how would I make that happen?
You wouldn't use Factum for that. Factum is not to enable you to build coins.
So what is Factum now?
You know, we should get into this actually. No, if we're
Put
going,
contracts in the Factum.
Well, I don't understand what
Real
a Factum
estate
is.
contracts.
What is that?
you could use
Is it just a part of the?
Factum just puts people's data in the blockchain.
So it's like a Word document that lets me put stuff in there.
It's like an archiving.
Archive.
You take your Word document, you
Yeah.
scan it,
Yep.
and then you hash it, and the hash is gonna it's gonna be a 32 digits.
When you say hash, do you mean like little?
It's a mathematical function.
It's a mathematical.
Wherein it goes
Alright.
through Bitcoin's is SHA-256, which is a long series of computations that culminates in a single
So
number.
when you say hash, you're saying the understanding of this that's backing it.
I'm using it
Do
as.
you want to
Okay.
explain how the
Good.
blockchain itself hashes each block?
Well, yes, the blockchain is hashing at all times. Each new block that comes hashes the previous block and includes that hash in it.
When you say block, are we like building a house on top of another house? Kind of thing?
That's a good analogy actually, because you need the previous block hash
Exactly.
to the
Yes, you
following
do.
one. So it's actually a very good analogy. You're taking the previous block hash, you're adding it to the next house. So you're literally building a house on top of a house.
So what you're doing is it's a way for us to record history.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Okay.
an inviolable way to record history. In fact, if it ever came to disagreement between history books and the Bitcoin blockchain, believe Bitcoin, because it cannot be doctored like
So
that.
a hash is basically a
Cool.
short list of bits, a short sequence of bits that the exact state of them represents the state of a much longer bit of information, a much longer
Correct.
sequence of bits.
And-
And it's basically, you're not gonna generate that same short one from a different other document, so it basically proves the existence of the bigger thing.
Yes.
And anyone can upload that particular hash with whatever they want to prove the history of whatever that is.
I think Gary has a question. Start with Gary, sorry.
Wondering why, I know back in the day, like Satoshi put a scan of that newspaper in the blockchain, right?
Yes,
So why
You
would
can
you
do
need
that.
Factum to do any of this?
because that's a good question. Anyone can put a hash into the blockchain, but the guy who did that knows how to hash. Do you know how to hash a thing into the blockchain? No, so you're
You know
gonna.
how to smoke hash.
Well, yeah, we all do.
You can probably Google it and find out in the more you
But,
search.
Basically, most people do not know how to hash data into a hash function, so you're going to have someone do it for you. That person can be a centralized authority or a decentralized network like Factum. Factum is just a decentralized manner of doing that. Your alternative is to go to someone like me and pay me to do it for you, and I could lie. and put something that wasn't what you meant, like Gary is lame on the blockchain.
Not necessarily.
Permanently recorded.
And then he never changed it.
So, in trying to visualize, as a layman, trying to visualize Bitcoin ledger, I see like accounts and balances. How does that relate to the hash? Like how is, like to me it's like a record book of all these like accounts and how much information there is.
It
Where
is.
does the hash get thrown in? Into that?
Well, so, right, a block is a piece of data. It's a list of all the transactions that were issued and included in that block. So every 10 minutes, all of us who sent money, issued transactions to do that, will get put in the next block and recorded. The reason they hash the previous block when building the new block. So each block is made, literally, each block is made up of all the transactions that were included in that block, all the people trying to send money, plus the hash of the previous block. And if you didn't do that, it would break the chain. Each block must reference the last block to, otherwise you're messing with history. They reference one another, and
So you can only read a block if you have a passcode?
no, anyone can read the block. It's
Oh,
public.
public.
Uh,
So if somebody's putting money into a block and then putting documents in a block, and I wanna just put documents in that block, I have to say, okay, well, there's money here, so I'm gonna keep the money there, but I'm putting this document in here, and then the next block's gonna be written by whoever else saying, there's money in a document here, but I'm gonna put another block on top of that, and I'm gonna put money over here. Is that kinda how it works?
Literally what happens, to be
Okay.
like technically precise, would be all of us in Bitcoin are on a peer-to-peer network. Right?
Okay,
And we all send transactions when we want to send money. And these transactions just float and bounce around the peer-to-peer network between all of us as a message relaying back and forth. But it's not included in the blockchain yet. And here's the term for this is once a transaction is included in the blockchain, it has been confirmed. If a transaction is not confirmed, you may not want to trust that person. Let me give you an example. When we issue a transaction, suppose I had 1 Bitcoin, right? And suppose I issued 2 transactions saying give my Bitcoin to Mike and another one saying give my Bitcoin to Aaron. Obviously, I can't give that Bitcoin to both of them. And those 2 transactions will bounce around the network though, and people will see both of them. One of them will have to get confirmed on the blockchain, and the other transaction will die and disappear from the network, right? So until your transaction is etched into the blockchain, you should be careful about trusting it, right? Because you could do what I just described and try to double spend people.
Does that actually happen?
Well,
Bitcoin?
before wallet, like there was wallets that didn't protect from that, right? Or
It's
you
happened to
could-
people, but it's not common. Definitely not common, because it's
I've seen people try it with my service.
Oh,
yeah, it's not something that's it's something you can stop easily.
What would you
Wallets would
even,
allow them to do that.
what tool would you use to
Weird.
try and double spend?
Why are you asking, Carrie?
I just
Well,
never understood